I think it's important for employers to remember that just as much as we are interviewing the candidate is interviewing us. I also want prospective employees to know that too, right? So you are also evaluating the employer to determine whether or not you really want to work there. The second you walk through that door, the receptionist, every person that you interact with is evaluating you as much as you're evaluating them. As much as you think you may want that job, just keep in mind too that you want to be realistic about, is this really an employer that you want to work with? And did you get a good feeling after you left the interview?
Hello and welcome to The Clear Voice, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. This week, Clear Career President Michael Bays is with us. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Thanks, James. I appreciate you having me again.
Well, thanks for setting this up. Today, we're going to talk with one of my favorite people in a city. I always try to make sure the finance person and the HR person is not mad at me because they can really make your life miserable if you're not doing the things the way they want you to do them.
Yeah, well, she's one of my favorite people to know as well, and just really supportive in the industry. And I know it's somebody who has a heart of service. I'll let you introduce our guest, but I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, Michael, this week we have Cheree Bontrager with us. She's a veteran municipal human resources professional with more than 2 decades of public sector experience and over 25 years in HR overall. She holds graduate credentials in conflict management and dispute resolution from SMU. She maintains both SPHR and SHRM SCP certifications and has long been active in TMHRA leadership. Her work centers on supporting municipal employees through strong partnerships and thoughtful HR practices across Texas. Cheree, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we appreciate you coming and telling us a little more about the HR world and all of your vast experience. And we always want to start with getting to know you a little bit better. Can you tell us about your background and what drove you into HR and what keeps you coming back?
Absolutely. Well, I started my HR career in the late 1900s at Ericsson during the telecom boom in Richardson, Texas, and quickly realized that I was looking for a career in human resources where I could really have an impact and make a difference. And that's when I left private sector and went to public sector, working for the city of Saxe. Small city, great city with lots of strong leadership, but decided I wanted to grow my career and have worked in a couple of other cities, currently at the city of Allen, but been in municipal HR for 23 years. It's my passion. We have an opportunity in local government to make a difference in the lives of others, and particularly in HR. So I strive every day when I wake up in the morning to just see what I can do to make those lives around me better.
Sometimes I think there's a misconception about what HR does. If you had to explain to an employee what your function is, what would you tell them?
So our purpose in HR is to give employees the tools and resources that they need and create a positive work environment so that they can effectively serve our residents.
There's lots of things that go into it, so we appreciate what you do every day. One of the questions that we always hear from candidates, and whether you're a frontline employee or applying for an executive position, resume and application help. Are there any tips for people when they're putting in their resume and their application that you can help them make it stand out a little bit better, make them go to the front of the line other than, having the skills that they need?
So I think it's vitally important to be concise and accurate, obviously, in your documentation and first and foremost truthful. But I think we often don't give a lot of credit to the cover letter. The cover letter really explains why you're interested in the position, and it's important to take time to complete those cover letters and include that along with a resume. And never hurts to send that resume and cover letter to the hiring manager along with applying for the application. I'm a little bit old school in that I feel like still trying to reach out and have that human touch as an applicant can really set you apart. But of course, there's all the basic things that you learn when writing a resume. Make it concise, try to make it one page. Typically, you're not going to want to put your address on there, but you would want to put your name and maybe your LinkedIn handle or your LinkedIn connection so that people can view you on LinkedIn. I think it's also abundantly important to stay active on LinkedIn and make sure that you're engaging with prospective employers and prospective hiring managers through that avenue as well.
I found that cover letters are very important. And sometimes when we're doing these recruitments, some of them are not great. One of the things that I always have a problem with is when it's just like a text version of your resume. Like it's just the same thing that's on your resume, and they never get to like, well, why do you want to go work for this city? Why do you want this position?
Yes, and particularly you want to explain in the cover letter why you are looking to leave your current position, right? So, especially if you are looking for a lateral move or you're looking for a position that maybe has less responsibility, or if you've had some gaps in employment, it's very important to clarify that in the cover letter so that when they look at your resume or look at your application, your cover letter helps fill those gaps and helps tell the story of why you're interested in the move.
So you wouldn't write necessarily unemployed on your resume, but you'd explain whatever that was. If you were stay-at-home mom or dad, or if something else happened, you'd want to explain that in your cover letter.
Exactly. Yeah. And we find that sometimes because of the nature of our business, we have sometimes people who retire from one city and then decide they weren't actually ready for retirement. So in the cover letter, that's a good opportunity to explain that rather than the hiring manager just not understanding or knowing why you haven't worked in the past 6 months. I would say that whenever recruiters or hiring managers are reviewing applications, they probably spend no more than about 1 minute for each one. I mean, we look at hundreds of thousands of resumes and applications a year. So you've got to make sure that you're telling that concise story because if someone looks at your resume and sees a gap in employment, they may just automatically pass it over. So you've got to tell that story.
Is there any red flags in resumes or cover letters that you can think of that might make anybody just pass it up?
I think it's really important to, on the question or on an application, that question that says, why are you interested in leaving or why did you leave? To make sure that you explain in a positive way your departure from one job to the next, but also be honest, right? I've seen some applications or resumes where there's derogatory information about the current or previous employer, and that might be a reason why those applications get passed up.
Yeah, I think you could almost type your actual reason into Google or into one of the AI helpers, and it can translate it into something that's more professional and give you some tips there before you write, you're just miserable at this place.
Yeah. James, if I can pipe in on that for a second, there are some people out there who ask about using AI for resumes and things. And in my personal opinion, I really like people who can utilize some of the aspects of AI, especially if you've written a resume or cover letter and then you just want to check it for any errors or make sure it's on point. It's a really good, second look at that just to make sure you're not making some of the more easy mistakes to have in there, such as a spelling error or something like that. But even more so, if you're having a real hard time explaining some of those transitions, maybe it just gives you some different ways that can, put some different thoughts in your mind about how you can communicate that. And the other thing is as we move into a world that is more AI impacted, I think it's good to have candidates who know how to use that, but also use it in an ethical way that still demonstrates their humanism. And so I don't know if that is something that Cheree's experienced before.
Yes, Michael, I would agree with that. And I think it's much better, to your point, to write your cover letter and then put it in AI for spell check and that sort of thing, and maybe just rewording a few minor things rather than asking AI to write you a cover letter because it's going to be more your own style and your tone if you put it in there as opposed to you taking something and then trying to adapt it to you. Because the other thing that hiring managers are looking at when they're reviewing that cover letter is your writing style, especially if it's a type of position where you would be doing a lot of writing. And so you don't want to misrepresent your writing style or your ability to write by using an AI generated cover letter or resume, or even your email correspondence back and forth with the hiring manager or human resources. And I would say that's true of using any AI device, right? And it's so abundantly important that anything that's on your resume is accurate and be prepared to answer very specific questions about what's on your resume or what's in your cover letter. Honesty and integrity always wins, right?
Yeah, there's lots of formatting and even you can read some AI generated things and you can just tell that it's all AI generated. When you do your prompts, you can tell it just to give you advice on it, not change anything. So there's different ways if you go in where it's not rewriting what you wrote and it's just going to maybe highlight a section for you to look at and give you some possible language changes. But Yeah, just typing in generate a cover letter for this job is probably not a good idea. What about interviewing? We see some really great interviews when we're doing recruitments, and then sometimes there's some things that just come up and we almost can't believe it. So I'm not sure if it'll help saying some of the more unbelievable things that we hear, because I'm not sure if those candidates can figure that out, but maybe you've got some tips for them.
So I would say, obviously, we want to be prepared. And when I'm giving coaching or guidance to someone who I know is going into an interview, the best thing that you can do is you can think about what is the takeaway that you want the people who are interviewing you to walk away with and remember about you. So think about, like, what is your tagline? What is your standout? And make sure that you think through some ways in which to get that point across in the interview. So, for example, if you're interviewing for a human resources position, and what you want to get across in that interview is that what's most important to you as a human resources professional is making sure the employees know that they're cared about. So that's kind of your theme. So set your theme for that interview and stick with it and give very specific examples. And oftentimes, we obviously never know what someone's going to ask in an interview. So you obviously want to do some research on the company. You want to do some research on the types of questions that may be asked and prepare your answers, practice those answers. As much as people hate role playing, I think it's absolutely necessary that you sit down with somebody, give them a set of interview questions, and you practice answering those. And then you might find yourself a little bit disappointed when you get in the interview and then they didn't actually ask the questions that you prepared for. But there's a way around that, right? So usually at the end, they'll say, do you have any questions or is there anything you want to add? And if you feel like you had a really good answer teed up for one of those questions that you had prepared for, that's when you can bring that in. You want to make sure that you are conveying to the people who are interviewing you not just what the company can do for you, but how your skills and qualifications will help them, right? So oftentimes we're thinking, oh, we've got to get this job. It's going to help us advance our career. We're going to get more money, whatever the internal motivation may be that you want the position. But you've got to focus outward instead of focusing inward, and remember that as you're going through the interview. There's also an acronym. I think a lot of people have heard of the STAR method. When you're in that interview and you get a question, you want to describe a situation, describe the specific task related to the situation, describe the actions, and then the results. So the STAR method. In an interview, you'll get some really great behavioral questions that ask you for an example. So you want to make sure that you're thinking through those very specific examples and make sure that they're actual real life examples, because if you try to make up an example, then you will get stumped in the interview. So think through real life examples of a situation. Like a question may be, give us an example of a time when you had to make a difficult decision, and then get people on board on that difficult decision. So you want to think that through in advance and have an example of that. They may not ask the question that is give an example, but they may say, how do you make decisions? So then you would want to talk through your decision methods. And then, even though they didn't ask for an example, it's really nice to be able to follow up with a specific example.
One of the questions that, almost always is asked is, tell us about yourself at the beginning of the interview. Can you give us a little advice, like how long should candidates answer that? What depth should they go to? That one always seems to trip people up. And they're talking about themselves, and there are people that don't like to talk about themselves. So maybe that's part of it. Do you have any advice for that question?
Yeah, so I would say be concise and make it specifically job related. Put yourself in their shoes. What would they want to know, right? So you want to talk about relevant skills and experience, but you also want to give them an idea about your personality and what's important to you in a job and how you can help make them better. What are you going to bring to the table that is going to elevate the organization? But I'm glad you brought up that point about some people don't like talking about themselves, because in an interview, this is your opportunity, even if you hate it, to brag about yourself and really talk about the things that you've accomplished, because you're only getting one opportunity to sell yourself here. And even if you're not a salesperson for yourself, if you don't do it for yourself, no one else will. So you've got to be an advocate for yourself in an interview.
And I really appreciate you reminding candidates to prepare for these interviews. You don't know who's coming in before or after you. When I got into policing, there were websites, but there wasn't a whole lot of information. I couldn't go prepare a whole lot, and I could ask a couple of questions to people that I knew, maybe at a city, but today there's all kinds of information out there available. That's one of the reasons that I really like doing the position cast. If there's a position cast available and you're not watching it and taking notes on that, that's probably the hiring authority or one of the hiring decision makers telling you exactly what they're looking for. Whatever information is out there available, I don't know how else to stress. That's a great way to prepare and be ready for, what are the problems related to your role that you're trying to get to at that specific city is what you need to talk about.
Exactly. And if you have an opportunity in advance to attend any of the city events or go to the library or do anything to engage with that community to get a feel for what the community is like, I think that would help tremendously. And of course, there's a wealth of information out there, and you don't want to overwhelm yourself with trying to memorize everything. But it's important to have because they may say, "What do you know about our community?" And you want to be able to engage in that community and find out what you truly genuinely like, what you see that you like, so that you can talk about it in the interview. And I think it's important for employers. I know this is for prospective employees, but I think it's important for employers to remember that just as much as we are interviewing the candidate is interviewing us. And I also want prospective employees to know that too, right? So you are also evaluating the employer to determine whether or not you really want to work there. So if you get to the end of the interview and they don't give you an opportunity to ask questions, or they're just rushing you through, or you just don't have a good positive experience when you walk in, which that's a good point too. When you walk in, you want to make sure you're being kind. And the second you walk through that door, the receptionist, every person that you interact with is evaluating you as much as you're evaluating them. As much as you think you may want that job, just keep in mind too that you want to be realistic about, is this really an employer that you want to work with? And did you get a good feeling after you left the interview?
There's so much good stuff that we're talking about here. I want to chime in on just a couple of these things. I think as a recruiting firm, it's where we look at it and people ask, well, when does the recruitment end? And the recruitment ends, after the person accepts the position, right? Because you, like you said, are kind of trying to get a person that's the right fit, but also making them feel comfortable with the organizations they're going to be joining. And so, that back and forth is important. One thing that we do a little bit different here at Clear Career, and I think something that James and I see on a lot of our semifinalist virtual interviews is we do a 30-minute long virtual interview with our candidates, and we prep them for that beforehand by saying, hey, we've got 30 minutes. So there is a time constraint, and we do cap those at 30 minutes, but it's a real live interaction with members of our team and the candidate to where we can facilitate gathering a lot of that information. Most of the time it's with people who have served in the similar role that you're applying for. And so our role isn't just to ask you basic questions. It's really to test your depth and kind of understanding of some of the higher level concepts of executive leadership or what you're going to be doing for the city. And so I think it's unique because it's a really well-rounded conversation. And I always tell candidates it's more about the city. It's not necessarily about you. It's looking at your skill sets and trying to go, hey, here's how I can help. Especially in public service, it's not just we're trying to get in to fill a role, we're getting in to fill an impact, and so I think those are some really important things that we see. But again, thank you for mentioning, how important it is for the employer to also be actively engaged in winning over the potential finalists for the job.
And I love that you do that consultation with the prospective employee, because as a prospective employee, you want to have all of your resources available, right? So having the resource, if you're going through a recruitment with Clear, to, either do a mock interview or just get all of the assistance and the guidance that you can from the recruiter that you're working with can help tremendously, right? Because the recruiter has the insight to the organization, knows what the organization's looking for, and it's important to be humble and accept that guidance as you're going through the process and really listen to what the recruiter has to say and the tips that the recruiter is giving you.
And Cheree, one of the things that I've always watched before I've looked at a job is what's going on in the city. And you talked about look at the resources and visit. I know candidates are watching city council meetings, for instance. And that's one of the things that I think, we might want to talk about is just how important, especially for a city council that's potentially going to hire a city manager, how important that is. Like they're being evaluated by the candidate as well. And I've seen some good candidates walk away from an opportunity because it didn't look like a professional place. And that may not be council. It may be something else. It may be staff. It could be residents on Facebook. I mean, there's a whole lot of things, but cities need to understand that when they're going through these, and especially hiring a city manager, that those candidates are looking at all of these things, and not all of them you can control, but that's how a good candidate is evaluating whether they want to take that opportunity or not.
I think that's a great point, James. And, some of that stuff as a candidate you can take with a grain of salt, but you've got lots of insight into the city council dynamics and leadership dynamics whenever you're reviewing those city council meetings. And it's important for leaders within the organization to remember that we are salespeople for our city. We are constantly representing our city, and we have to put our best foot forward. And in city government, without our people and without that service component, we're nothing. So we have to constantly remind ourselves.
And if there's a council out there that feels like they could use a third party to come in and smooth over some of the differences that they're having that are coming out more than just professional disagreements, Michael, what would you suggest to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different options, but like having a council retreat, Clear does offer council retreats, and sometimes we'll get in and really not even just help facilitate communication, but also help them maybe develop a strategic plan as a council to, hey, what do we really want to focus on? A lot of times, councils have a lot of great ideas. They just don't know how to communicate that amongst a group in which they're all seamlessly going in the same direction. And so, whether you use Clear or a number of other providers that are out there, it's just making sure that you're getting somebody in who can help guide the conversation. And a lot of times, serving as a city manager, it was always great for me to have an outside facilitator come in, because then I can be a participant in the growth as well. I'm leading the council retreat as a city manager, it's really difficult for me to maintain perspective as well as be kind of the tour guide. And so having somebody come in that can facilitate that and also let me then participate as a policy advisor to council, I think was always really helpful for myself. And I know some other city managers that feel the same way. And also there's a level of truthfulness that an outsider can come in and maybe confront any of that dysfunction that may be going on, and not really worry about how it damages the long-term working relationship that's really needed between a mayor and a manager or assistant city manager. Not that they're going to get in and be confrontational, but sometimes you just need to point out some different communication skill sets that may be able to tuned up or tuned down to really facilitate the best communication that's possible.
Yeah, sometimes you've got to have some critical conversations with people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the cool thing with this. Something that I get to do that I really enjoy is I teach career development at Leadership Command College. I get to spend, 4 hours with police executives. And the funny thing is a lot of police executives, they haven't interviewed for jobs in a long time. They get on with a police agency and, maybe they're moving up in different ranks, but usually they're being interviewed by people that are their peers or things like that. So it's not, something that may be a little bit less comfortable when you're walking into an interview and you don't know the people that you're going to be talking to. When we see government professionals move into that open market where they're going to be going into a new city that, hey, I don't know anybody there, or the panel are strangers to me, even though they've talked to people their entire careers, no matter what role they've been in, they feel uncomfortable getting in there and presenting themselves in a way that really makes sense for that community to go, hey, this is who we need to fill this position. And so I'm so excited about this conversation with Cheree and everybody that's out there. I think it's really important that you take the opportunity to always grow. Even if you think you're a good interviewee, make sure and go, hey, you know what? Even though I think I've got this, let me just tune it up a little bit just so I know that I'll knock it out of the park.
Yeah, I always thought if you had that opportunity, sometimes a neighboring city will need people for panels for themselves internally or something. It's not quite as good as being interviewed, but it is good to go and participate in an interview process, even if you're asking the questions, because you get to see people answering those and how they handle them and the questions being asked. So I always encourage, and plus you get to help your neighbor.
Yes. The more you can participate in the process, whether you are interviewing or being interviewed, the better. And even if you're maybe not even necessarily actively looking for a job, but you've been in the same city for 15 years in the same position, 10 years, even 5 years, sometimes it's a good idea just to put yourself out there and do some interviews so that you can get some experience in interviewing. And also, you never know when that opportunity might be the right one.
Definitely. Cheree, can we talk a little bit about the hiring reality in government right now? What does that look like if you're a city manager? Are you guys getting a lot of good applicants in for all the positions, or is the market tight for certain things?
I think that overall, in general, there is a gap in qualified talent for government positions. I know that Michael can probably speak to this a little bit better than I can from a city manager standpoint, but particularly with finance directors, human resources directors, we've got some gap in people who are ready and willing. And I think willing might be a big component here to step up into some of those leadership roles. So it's incumbent upon people who have been in the business for a while to really start mentoring and bringing people along and to help people understand just the real value, the personal fulfillment that you can have in a leadership position in government, particularly in city management or in an assistant city manager role or in a director role.
The police department, for example, I mean, I think police departments across the country are struggling to get applicants in, and they're doing a lot of them are doing all the things that you can do. If you're a large department, you may be traveling all over the country looking for applicants. You may be showing up to job fairs and all these things. But what about cities? Like, we've talked to a couple of interns on the program, and they've talked about how valuable that experience is. I don't know if you guys run an intern program, but for some of these jobs, like you're talking about finance director, how are we getting these people in to attract them away from the private sector? Because they can go do with the same skill set, probably make more money. And that's not traditionally one of those things maybe that people are realizing, oh, I am part of the public sector and I'm helping the public and doing all these amazing things as a finance director. How can cities attract those pieces into their talent pool?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about marketing and awareness about what we do in city government and how we can really have an impact on a local level. And I see that people are more apt to want to be able to balance their work and home and being able to really market that as well as just being a part of a community and being able to make a difference. And once people are more aware of that and really more understand what we do on a daily basis and how we can have an impact, I think that helps. But it is definitely a marketing avenue that that we sometimes miss out on, right? And cities don't always have the resources to do fancy marketing campaigns like some of the private sector industry. So a lot of it is about just really putting yourself out there on social media, really being able to be out in the community whenever you've got events and that taking advantage of those types of things. If you've got a festival, then maybe Human Resources has a booth out there promoting the jobs, and that's how you can bring awareness.
Yeah, and the other thing, Cheree, I think it's oftentimes municipalities play the same strings over and over again. I think there's a couple of things that I've noticed in when I was leading recruitment for a police agency. I think dynamic leadership is always sought after, right? It's not every city that can hire a dynamic leader in a director role. But if you have that, it makes it easier to recruit for whatever department they're in, right? Because, they're going to be out there, their people are going to be energized. Those people who are in the field are going to be talking amongst each other, and it really creates a synergy. But absent a dynamic leader that's really inspiring people just to come in and apply for positions, I think we've really pulled away from our purpose a little bit too much. A lot of times cities are marketing, salaries, benefits, all of those things, which are super important in today's world, especially with the younger generation. But I think that it's also equally important that we talk about what your impact, like you said, is going to be. Sure, you can go be a finance director for a Fortune 500 company and you're going to make good money. You're probably not going to feel the impact that you would if you're working for a community. And I think the more we demonstrate that from people who've been in the profession, to go, hey, here's what it made me feel like when I was out there serving and some of those things. Because, at the end of the day, now that we're looking, like myself looking back at my career, it's like I'm really proud of some of the things that I accomplished and how the quality of life in different communities were improved because I was a part of something. So I think the more we sell that, it really sets us apart from just that conversation of how do we get in and make the most money or the most benefits.
Absolutely. I think it's about telling the story and also creating a culture within your organization that by word of mouth spreads and people want to be a part of that culture, right? So we know that negativity is contagious. So we want to make sure that we are really being intentional about creating that culture where by word of mouth, you know that that particular city is a good quality place to work where the people who are working there really feel valued and feel like they're making a difference.
Well, if we're having problems hiring people, then that means we need to do a really good job with retention then. What help do you have for cities that are trying to figure out how to retain employees longer?
A lot of that is about, again, creating that culture where people feel valued, where they are empowered, but also just creating an environment that's fun to be in, right? Making sure that there are activities, even if they don't, cost a lot of money, where there's an environment that's a relaxed environment. There's a culture of accountability, but also an environment where the work really matters.
Well, I didn't hear you talk about pay raises. So, how important are pay raises versus that culture, the feeling of belonging, the feeling of making impact? I mean, surely they matter, but it doesn't sound like they're the most important thing for most of the employees.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think your pay needs to be adequate. However, that is not the most important thing. I think we could all attest personal account of situations where the pay was really good, but we just weren't happy in the environment because it was just wasn't the culture that was fulfilling to us or the work that mattered.
I was probably the happiest I've ever been making $39,000 as a night shift patrol officer, and I didn't even know what I was going to make until I got my first paycheck.
Those were the good old days, weren't they?
Those were the good old days. How can department heads partner with HR to make their lives a little bit better?
So I think it's important for department heads, supervisors, employees to know that HR is here to help. We're a resource. We are not the police. We're not here to tell you how to do your jobs. We're here to help you weigh pros and cons of difficult situations and let you make the decision at the end of the day and then support you in that decision. So it's abundantly important that we have strong relationships between human resources and the departments, particularly the department directors and the supervisors, because we navigate difficult situations. And at the end of the day, whenever we're making those difficult decisions, as long as we are keeping our values in mind when making those decisions and making sure that we're treating people with dignity and respect all along the way, the organization will be better for it in the end, and so will we. It's about creating the trust and having difficult conversations and getting through hard situations together. But I think HR sometimes gets a bad rap that we're only there when someone's going to be terminated or we're just, setting up the rules. And it's more about, and from an HR perspective, not saying no, but saying, yes, how can we figure out a way to support the departments? Because the department directors, there are the experts in their field. HR, we're the expert in compliance in our field, but we don't know how to make an arrest. We don't know how to put out a fire. We don't know how to fix a water main break. So we're not here to tell you how to do that. We're just here to support you along the way.
Well, thank you. You've been involved with TMHRA pretty extensively over the last several years on the board and serving in leadership positions there. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's TMHRA got coming up?
Of course, yeah. So we have our annual conference coming up in May. We also had just finished our conference on public safety for employee relations, which was hugely successful. And just a little bit about TMHRA, Texas Municipal Human Resources Association. We're an association of HR professionals who work specifically in local government. That network and that community is so critical and so important to human resources professionals. We have an opportunity to share information, support each other. We have an opportunity to interact with vendors such as Clear, get resources and support in order to better serve our communities. We also have our new certification program. It's a certification that is specific for HR professionals who work in local government. We're doing our second cohort in May, and then we'll have our third cohort in November. It requires that you've worked in human resources in the local municipality for 1 year. But we're really excited about that program because once an HR professional has completed that program, it demonstrates that they have a proficiency in local government HR. So that has been extremely successful, and we're really, really excited to get that off the ground and to be able to offer that opportunity to our members.
And the information for that certification program and everything about the conference coming up is all on the website, I'm sure.
Yes, tmhra.org.
Awesome. Michael, is Clear going to be at TMHRA?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are a platinum sponsor of TMHRA, and we really appreciate the growth of the organization, not only just as a matter of numbers, but also helping their members continually better themselves. something that's really important in all municipal government and leadership is that consistent growth mindset of no matter what level you are, you may be one of the top people in your profession, but continually demonstrating the ability to grow and learn more from others. I've really valued being a part and being around the TMHRA folks and really getting to visualize how much they really embrace that mind and that concept of further development.
Yeah, I heard the TMHRA conference is the best one in Texas out of out of everything in local government. So I don't know if that's true. I've never been, but that's what I've been told.
I would agree. Absolutely.
I get to go to the Chiefs Conference, City Manager Conference, and I'll tell you, the one thing you never want to do is from everybody in the organization, the TMHRA folks can definitely karaoke. And so if you want to have the best karaoke competition around, they're so talented, not only in HR, but also just in their ability to perform. It's pretty amazing.
Yes, I think some of us may have missed our calling as singers. Not me, but some other HR professionals. Yeah. But we do appreciate the support and the sponsorship of Clear.
And are we going to be shooting episodes of the podcast down there this year?
Yeah, I haven't pitched that to anybody from TMHRA, but this might be our opportunity to do that. I think the annual conference is going to be in Round Rock, and a really excellent opportunity for, James, now for you to come down and potentially start doing some podcasting, make some HR directors podcast famous. So,
yeah, they've got the stories. I don't know if they can tell them yet. They may have to wait till after they retire.
I tell you what, once an HR professional, always an HR professional, those stories, they stay in the vault. Sorry.
Well, Cheree, I really appreciate you being on tonight. We're looking forward to the conference coming up. It sounds like a whole lot of fun. Definitely go check out that certification program if you haven't already. Before we wrap up, I want to see if Michael's got anything for us.
Yeah, James, I think this podcast is releasing in the near future. And so I'm also really excited to say that I had the opportunity to be a guest on Chad Wright's Leading Thriving Cities podcast. And I believe that's going to be launched out on Monday as well. So I could be doubly podcast famous next week. But really, the more I'm involved with folks like Chad, Marcel Brunel, there's a number of people in the industry that have a heart of service, and really just being able to collaborate with them, learn from each other, and consistently be able to offer services to communities and people in the profession to assist them. It's a real honor to be a part of that. I'm excited. And as always, Clear is available for recruitments and organizational reviews. One of our best and most valuable products is the ability to have our professionals get in the organization and kind of take a look from an outside perspective to see how you can take the department to the next level. And so, always looking for cities who want to have our advice on that and excited to grow with them.
What opportunities do we have out there now? We've got Bridgeport Assistant Chief posted.
Yeah, there's a Bridgeport Assistant Chief of Police. There is a Bridgeport Water and Wastewater Manager position. There will soon be the Marshall City Manager position that'll be coming in line, and also the Morgan's Point City Manager position. We have a couple of really great city leadership opportunities. As always, I think it's great that we're going to be out there working with these communities to find the right leaders for their organization.
Well, thank you. Cheree, I'm going to give you the last word. Any advice for city managers, HR professionals, other department heads as they navigate all the complex duties they've got out there?
So I'll share some advice that was shared to me by a friend of mine many years ago. And that was try not to take yourself so seriously, right? So we just have to stop and just enjoy what we're doing and take time to really focus on those people around us. And if you're at a place in your career where you can give back and mentor to others, that's one of the most fulfilling things that we can do. So I would say we just need to stop and have fun and enjoy each other and not worry about the small things. Don't sweat the small things.
I agree. Yeah, don't make an emergency when you don't have to. Well, Cheree and Michael, thank you for being on today. Thank you to the listeners for being here with us, and thank you for everything you do in your communities. Like and subscribe to the Clear Voice on your favorite podcast platform. Follow Clear on LinkedIn and check out our website for those amazing career opportunities, and we will catch you next time.